All right. Tommy, if you want to get started, we can get started here. Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome. My name is Paul Foote. I'm the Director of Vendor Business Development at Exclusive Networks. And thanks for joining us to learn about SentinelOne and their connector for Fortinet. Our presenter, Tommy, will be presenting today. He's a Senior Sales Engineer at SentinelOne. Tommy, do you want to introduce yourself and get started?
Sure, thanks, Paul. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yes.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Tommy Hoy. I'm a Senior Director of Sales Engineers here at SentinelOne. As Paul mentioned, we're going to be talking about SentinelOne, a little bit about the technology, and also kind of tell you how we are contributing to the Fortinet security fabric. So definitely a lot of good information. But for those of you that have not heard of SentinelOne before, I wanted to give you a little bit of background about the company. So we were founded back in 2013. We're headquartered in Mountain View, California. Currently sit at a little over 300 employees or so. Currently sit at around 300 employees or so. And we are actively protecting over 2,500 customers. And amongst those customers are 3 of the Fortune 10. So last year was definitely a very pivotal year for us. We were able to sell into, slide timing. We were able to sell into 3 of those Fortune 10 last year, and definitely something that we're looking to build upon the momentum. And we're looking to increase the company's success this year. The product itself is a fully AV certified technology, definitely something, it is a fully certified AV replacement technology, tried and tested by multiple third-party analyst communities, including Gartner, NSS Labs, and several others. But what the founders set out to do was to create a true single-purpose agent. Sorry, hang on, let me turn this off.
Sorry about that, guys. Obviously, we had a transition.
Yeah.
Technical difficulty. Thanks for. Sorry, Tommy.
We're good. So what I was saying was basically what the founders set out to do was to create a true single-purpose agent technology that addressed both endpoint protection as well as EDR capabilities, endpoint detection and response. Still did it. Anyways, so the reason for that is because when you take a look at the market, you always had vendors that started off on one end of the spectrum. So either they were an endpoint protection. Sorry, let me turn off all of the transitions. Okay, that should do it.
Click on after click, Tommy.
For transition?
On mouse click, up one. There you go.
Okay, good. All right, we should be good now. Let's see how it goes. So whatever end of the spectrum you started on, whether it be EPP or EDR, because the markets converged, you were looking to either quickly build the, oh, still didn't work. You were looking to quickly build the lacking capabilities. So if you were endpoint protection focusing on prevention, you were trying to build an EDR capability. And if you were on the EDR side of things, then you were looking to try to build an endpoint protection prevention capability. And so a lot of times what happens is it creates an unnatural or a slow moving approach. And even to this day, some of the companies still don't have a single agent approach, or the piece that was added to the platform itself was built to be very rudimentary and a lot of times inconsistent or even unreliable. So building both of the capabilities from the start, as is what SentinelOne has done, is definitely something more efficient and more effective. On the same note, the product was designed and built based on 4 core value pillars. The first being protection. So we are not focusing just on prevention, it's overall protection. So giving you capabilities across any phase of the attack. Another pillar for us is going to be simplicity. So we don't want to overcomplicate things. We don't want to convolute them. We want to give you the data that you're looking for up front without having to build a query or sift through information just to find what you're looking for. So the faster we can give you the information, the better off you're going to be. The third pillar for us is going to be automation. So building on the simplicity, we want to keep things streamlined. We want to make current efforts more efficient. We don't want to add to the workflow. We want to reduce it. So definitely something that's very key for us. And then the last pillar being visibility. So we got to be able to see things to detect them. We also want to be able to hunt for things across the enterprise, whether or not the endpoints are online or offline. And we want to be able to go back in time so that we can accurately investigate and thoroughly investigate and rebuild that story for ourselves so that we understand what the root cause was and what we need to do to harden the environment so that it doesn't happen again. Technologically, what's interesting about SentinelOne is the fact that we are a true behavior-based technology. And you know, behaviors in the eyes of some of our competitors, some of the vendors that are out there, when you boil it down, it really just it ends up being a rule that is designed to mimic or detect a tactic or a technique. So you know, it's really just kind of a static situation, and that approach is actually really prone to false positives, which isn't something that's very simple to deal with. So, you know, for SentinelOne, the agent itself is powered by machine learning and automation. And what we're doing is we're essentially looking at all of the processes that are running. We're looking at all of the API calls that are being made, all of the memory operations, network connections, anything up and down from the kernel level. And the agent itself is actually actively mapping and judging all of the events in context. So it's not just a single event that we're looking at and trying to make a determination of whether or not it's good or bad. It's the entire session as a whole, right? So if we look at things in the context of time, SentinelOne provides multiple analysis engines that we use for protection. And so for pre-execution, this is where our preventative capabilities come into play. And so when a file is downloaded or written to disk or copied or whatever the situation is, two things happen. One, we run a machine learning algorithm on that file to try to determine its nature. So is it good or bad? But we also do hash that file, and we do send that hash up to the cloud to compare it against intelligence that's made available to the agents. And so if we're able to determine if a file is bad using one of those two analysis engines, then we will quarantine it immediately and stop it from ever running in the environment. But if you have a situation where upfront we are not able to determine that a file is bad, basically what we're going to tell that file is, I can't tell that you're bad, and I can't say for sure that you're going to do something bad in my environment. So I'm going to allow you to run. But I'm going to take a zero trust approach, and I'm still going to watch you like a hawk. And so every process that you spawn, every file that you touch, any network connection that you make, I'm going to judge that, and I'm going to try to figure out whether or not you're doing something bad. So behaviorally, we do watch it. If you double click a file, we will watch that file. We will try to understand what's happening. And so the unique thing is that if it ever does start to do something bad or tries to do things that are bad on a machine, we can still react to it in real time. And so where that's very unique and different compared to other solutions is that, especially EDR solutions, is that they're streaming back the OS events, and they're trying to determine based on that information if something is bad. But once they're able to make that determination, it still puts you in a reactive state. So with us being on the machine and making those determinations in real time, we are actually able to respond in real time as well. The other unique thing about this is that all of these engines, both the behavioral as well as the preventative engine, are all localized to the agent itself. So the agent is completely autonomous. There is no cloud reliance. The cloud lookup that we do for the preventative side is really just for commoditized malware, but we've trained the machine learning algorithm to look for all the different attributes and all the different characteristics of a lot of these known malware. So even if you were not connected to the internet whatsoever, you would still get the same level of protection as if you were connected to the internet. Now, for post-execution, we have a couple of features focusing on EDR capabilities specifically. Traditionally, EDR has been very data-centric with large amounts of data, and it carried a lot of baggage of also being very manual to correlate. And that's not something very easy to deal with. And then on the R side of EDR, the response side, you had basic functions such as kill and quarantine, but if you had an artifact that made changes to the system and those needed to be remediated or removed, you were again left to perform those functions manually. So there's kind of a going theme there with EDR. It's very manual, very intense, very processing intense. And so what we're doing with SentinelOne is on the EDR side, we are streaming back OS events as one of the features that we add on to the system. And those events are being made available for searching and investigation and IOC matching and things like that. But what we've also done is we've taken our core value pillars and applied that to the EDR realm by automatically correlating all of those data events. So because our agent is already mapping and relating all of the events in real time as it judges the behavior, we simply just kind of tag all of those related events with a unique identifier that we call true context. And so when it comes time to rewind the tape to investigate a situation further, SentinelOne, we basically have already stitched the story back together for you. And all you have to do is search based on that true context attribute, and the system will automatically rebuild the story for you and show you on screen. So it simply and automatically kind of provides that visibility that you're looking for. And this active mapping that the agent is doing is something that we're now calling active EDR because we're creating that context for you automatically. And we're not just passively streaming back the events so that you have to kind of stitch them together manually for yourself. For responses, one thing that I've noticed is that not a lot of people put much stress on response capabilities or even the problems that those efforts bring to the table. So in a situation where you have some threat that has created persistence by either adding 10 registry keys to the system, or maybe it's created 10 scheduled tasks, maybe it copied itself 100 different times to 100 different folders. When you're looking at a cleanup type of effort, you're having to delete manually 100 files, and you're having to clean up 10 different registry keys or 10 different scheduled tasks. And so that's not a very efficient effort, right? So, imagine having to delete one file at a time. That becomes very time intense and very tedious, and something that a lot of people definitely don't like having to do. But again, because the SentinelOne agent is mapping all of those things, and we know what files were touched, we know what changes were made to the system, what we're doing is we're actually offering a one-click remediation action where we can undo any new additions made to the operating system. And so that there alone saves tons of time and tons of effort. And not to mention the potential for mistakes, right? What if you have when you look at the human error aspect, maybe you missed a line that you had in the list, maybe you fat-fingered something, maybe you deleted the wrong file by accident, things like that. So automating that capability is definitely something of extreme value as well. In the event that something more severe has occurred, like maybe ransomware or something like that.
Hey Tommy.
Yep.
Tommy, this is David. The slide's supposed to change, right?
Not yet. I'm still talking to this one. Sorry.
Oh, so okay. So
yeah.
People, we are thinking about the slide should change. Okay.
Yeah. No, sorry. I
Sorry
did
about
it
that
because it kept transitioning and I didn't know how to turn it off. So yeah, we're still on the same slide, everybody. So in a more severe situation, as I was saying, like ransomware, if SentinelOne was not able to prevent that action from occurring, we do offer a unique feature called rollback. And so any files that were encrypted, we can now roll back to a pre-encrypted state. So now you don't have to rely on re-imaging and restoring from old backups that could be, you know, weeks or months old. So it's definitely something that saves a lot of time and definitely saves a lot of effort as well. Coverage-wise, SentinelOne supports Windows, Mac, and Linux. We even have coverage for legacy OS. So like Windows XP and Server 2003, things like that. Those are things that we do have coverage for. It's a very scalable solution. We do offer on-prem management, cloud-based management, as well as a hybrid approach. But about 98% of our customers are cloud-based, so it's kind of the going trend nowadays. Let me see. So let's go to the next slide here.
So Tommy, it shouldn't transition any further. Or you're going to do this demo though?
Yeah, we're about to jump in the demonstration. So I wanted to go ahead and just kind of take a second to show you how SentinelOne actually works visually, because I know I threw a lot of information out at everybody. So just a quick demonstration to show you the protection capabilities, the response, and even the EDR side of things. So this is a dashboard, but really quickly, I wanted to show you the policy configuration. And so for those of you that have experience with traditional AV engines like Symantec or McAfee or things like that, one thing that you're going to see about our policy engine is that it's very simple. It's not convoluted. There's no submenus upon submenus, no sub-features buried within features and things like that. What you see here is basically what you get. And so for us, there's two modes of operation. There's detect mode, and then there's protect mode. Detect mode is where we will detect things, we'll alert on them, but we will not take any automated action. But protect mode is where we will actually do something automatically in response to the threats that we detect. Here is where you can configure the level of automation that you would prefer. So if you want us to just do the basic kill and quarantine, we can do that. If you want us to go so far as to remediate the situation fully, we can do that as well automatically, and so on and so forth. And then we also have the different engines that are made available to the agent itself. So these are not different licenses or different modules or anything like that. The only reason why we break these out is just to give you a level of configurability. And so, you know, if you needed to turn a certain engine off for whatever reason, or if you needed to kind of tune the environment, tune the agent for your environment, we can do that very easily from this screen. Another feature I'll point out is deep visibility. So this is our EDR functionality where we do stream back those OS events. So it is policy based, so it can be on for some and off for others. These are the different categories that we currently record. So process events, registry, network connections, URL, file events, things like that. And then we also have a cool feature called remote shell, where we can actually create a native tunnel back to a select endpoint. So for Windows machines, we will create a native PowerShell session. And then for Mac machines, for example, we'll also create a bash session so that you have extended capabilities and you can do other things beyond what we are automatically doing for you within the SentinelOne system. So if I show you now, I have a VM here that we're going to victimize. But I have a couple of pictures that I allowed my son to pick out, you know, just for example's sake. But we have a very typical situation here where someone has received an email and, you know, just kind of falling victim to it. They open up the attachment. And once they kind of get into the meat of the document, what they see is immediately a threat is detected. Now, a normal user, and we all can kind of attest to this, is they're going to start questioning what they've done. They're going to start wondering what's happening. And then, of course, because they see this, probably their first reaction is going to be to close out the document. Because if it was never there, then it never occurred, and they're not going to get in trouble, and they don't have to get security hunting down their machine and things like that. But we all know that that's not true. The system has already been compromised. And so what's happening in the background is that this document has been programmed with a macro to basically delete Windows event logs, which is a typical thing that malware tries to do to erase its steps. It does create persistence mechanisms through scheduled tasks, but ultimately it contacts a command and control server to pull down ransomware, and then it actually executes that ransomware. And so the ransomware that we're using is a file called MacTub. And so for those of you that are not familiar with MacTub, one of the reasons why we use it is because it's actually pretty clever. And so what it does is once it's downloaded and it's run, it pops up this terms of service document to confuse the user. And once the user kind of figures out like this is something fake and they shouldn't be looking at it, then they close it out. But in the background, all of their files are actually being encrypted. So in this case, we do have a compromised box. I've lost access to all of my pictures. In a few seconds here, you'll probably see the ransomware note pop up on the desktop. And so we have a fully compromised machine that we now have to investigate and remediate as part of our normal security processes. If we come here to look at, come into the SentinelOne interface to look at some of the data, here's where you'll see the different actions that are available for us to run against this threat. Again, we are in a detect mode only right now. So anywhere you saw the threat detected pop up on the VM that we ran the compromise on, that's actually somewhere where SentinelOne could actually stop the action from occurring. But because we're in a detect mode, all of these things were allowed to occur. Also, again, just as a reminder, in detect mode, we will take no automated actions. So we do make those actions still available for you to take manually if you want to do that. But data that we're going to show you is going to be where we found the file that was triggered on, who their current user was that was logged in at the time, IP information, some threat lookup data. We also do have MITRE attack framework mappings if you all are familiar with MITRE. And then we'll also show you behaviorally what actually occurred and how everything related. So we all kind of know that it was a Microsoft Word document that was opened up that launched PowerShell. And so here's your command line argument. Here's your scheduled task that gets created. This file does also try to delete the shadow copies, which we do anti-tamper protect. So this failed, this action failed. And then we also see this upgrade.exe file, which is the actual ransomware itself. So definitely a lot of good visibility visually. And if you're not a visual person, we do show the raw data report. So if you wanted to see how everything related in a chronological kind of time frame or layout, you can see that as well. So here's where you see Microsoft Word. You can see things like where processes are writing into other memory space, where injections are happening and things like that. So you get a lot of good visibility just from the alert details that we present. Now, so we do still have a compromised endpoint. And so what we can do is from this screen, we can actually execute our rollback action. And when we come back to the VM, what you're going to start to see here in a few seconds is things closing out, files getting quarantined, and then ultimately my files being restored back to their original state. And so this process in normal kind of operations will take somewhere around maybe 2 to 3 minutes to perform, just because there's a lot more files to restore and a lot more things to recover. But in this case, as you can see, the infection is now completely gone from my system. All of the changes have been removed, and I've now regained access to my files that were previously encrypted. So definitely something that's very usable and very effective within any environment. Definitely something that saves a lot of time and effort from a protection standpoint. But when you look at the process that a normal security program would follow, you still have that question of how did this get into the environment? And even though all of us kind of saw what happened and how it all came about, in the real world, you're never really going to see that stuff because you don't have security people watching desktops all the time, right? So what we can do within the SentinelOne system is we can take any of these attributes, really. I mean, it could be the user, the desktop, the file location, the hash, any of those things. We can take any of those and come to our deep visibility database, and we can run a search. And so the goal for SentinelOne is to, with whatever atomic indicator you have, the goal is to find just one match. If you're able to find a match off of whatever indicator that you're using, you can then tell the system to go out and rebuild the story for you so that you know from time 0 forward, but also time 0 backwards. And so using our true context attribute that I mentioned before, when we get the results back, we're going to see a lot more information than what we saw just on the file events. So now that we can see that there's process events related, there's DNS, URL, scheduled tasks, all kinds of things. If we look at the process data specifically, at the root of everything is actually Microsoft Outlook. So now we can conclude within a matter of seconds that someone received an email, they opened up the attachment because that launched Microsoft Word, Word launched PowerShell, and so on and so forth. The rest is history. So when you relate this back to the security teams, this is something that's going to save them a lot of time and a lot of effort, because for them, the normal situation is that they find a match. Now they have to pivot off of the user and the time frame, grab a bunch of data then as well, and try to pick out which events from that standpoint actually relate to the event in question. And so again, it's still a very manual process to stitch together that entire story. So the fact that we're doing it for you actively and automatically is definitely something of huge value and huge capability. Cool, so let me come back here to our PowerPoint. Awesome. So I just wanted to, again, just kind of show you a brief demonstration so that you could see how the SentinelOne platform works. But coming back to our PowerPoint here.
Tommy, this should be good for you to go back to presentation mode.
Okay, we'll give it a try. All right, cool. So I wanted to talk to you all a little bit how SentinelOne is contributing to the Fortinet security fabric, right? So here at SentinelOne, we do believe in a layered defense approach, but not where you have an implementation where you've basically put all of your eggs in one basket and bought every single product from a single vendor. And the premise that they integrate and that they provide a single pane of glass is great. It definitely has a lot of value, and I completely understand the efficiency of it. But you also have to think about how those various modules came to be offered. And so there's a couple of situations that could include, right? So if it was organically built, you have to consider that maybe a network specialized company may not be able to build the best endpoint solution, right? It's going to be one of those situations similar to the EDR EPP kind of spectrum that I talked about before, where a network company is just trying to capture the endpoint space or the endpoint market share, and basically trying to retain that company within their brand as much as possible, right? But you also have situations where maybe a company has acquired another company so that they can increase their capabilities. But the acquired team isn't always retained, so you do lose some expertise in that situation. And in some cases, we've actually seen a lot of these where the technologies that were acquired aren't actually compatible. So there's a lot of re-architecting and rebuilding that has to take place. So it's not a natural progression. It's not a fluid process. And then you also have some companies that just kind of go out and OEM a different technology. But in that situation, you encounter the challenge of time constraints and resources that both companies can apply to make that OEM relationship meaningful and strong. So it's still a very, very complex process that doesn't introduce a really good capability from the get-go.
Hey, Tommy, we actually have a couple questions.
Oh, sure, yeah, go for it.
So how do you facilitate file restore, or is that just from shadow copying?
Yeah, good question. So the rollback feature is Windows-based only. We do leverage VSS to implement that function. It's actually a custom technology that we've built, but Windows is allowing us to register as a VSS type of technology. So we do leverage that, but it's not taking a full image of the system itself. It's only of the file system. So it's still very efficient. Okay.
And we have one more. How is the performance? One of the big issues with traditional AV is the performance hit. And you mentioned you do this with hashing.
Yeah, so hashing, the cloud lookup is one of the analysis engines that runs as part of the preventative capabilities, but it's not similar to the traditional AVs where you're having to schedule scans where every single file is basically hashed again, or everything is kind of run or compared against that DAT file or that database that was downloaded onto the endpoint. Again, this is something that we don't rely on. So even if you did, you encountered or downloaded or acquired some malicious file, and you were not connected to the internet, the machine learning algorithm is the approach that would take precedence and would actually do the detection, right? The only reason why we have that cloud lookup is just to eliminate commoditized malware. So hashing one file is definitely a lot quicker than hashing, thousands or tens of thousands that are on the system.
All right, thanks. That was it right now.
Hopefully that answered the question. If it didn't, please let us know. I want to make sure you guys fully understand. Let me see. So going back to what I was saying, if you take SentinelOne, where we do endpoint really, really well, and then you take Fortinet, who does network really, really well, both companies have an extreme interest in creating something that's highly capable, because first and foremost, it's going to help all of our customers, and secondly, it's going to bring to the table an offering that is much stronger and useful than what's out there today. And what makes it easier is that both platforms are fully open APIs, which allows an even broader set of integration points. But even getting into specifics a little bit, Fortinet has a lot of products, and what they're trying to do is improve, and what we're trying to do is improve and enhance the endpoint capabilities with a machine learning approach that actively maps and automatically responds to threats in real time. So, Fortinet making all of the great network-based tools that they have, if we can help enrich that product set with a great endpoint capability, now you have a really unique and useful layered approach. So here are the current target integration points. Some of them are already completed. So we currently have integrations built with the FortiGates, the FortiSIM, the Sandbox, and the Authenticator. We'll go through each of these in a few seconds to give you some details, but it's important to note that each integration point is independent of each other, but they can also affect another appliance. So for example, any intelligence that the Sandbox receives or creates even, it's ultimately shared with the FortiMail or the FortiGates. So, if you only had an integration set up with the FortiSandbox, you could still affect the FortiGates and the FortiMail, even if we didn't have an integration set up with those. Looks like we have some questions pop up, or no?
Yeah, I just answered them. I typed through them. They were just asking how it was, if it worked through FortiManager, which it does. I typed yes. So, but
cool. Thank you. So how we're accomplishing this again is using the approximately 300 API calls available within the SentinelOne system, and the widely open framework available within the Fortinet security fabric. But the SentinelOne connector itself has been built into a Docker container. So it's easy and lightweight to deploy. It runs completely on its own, communicating with each individual component, both with the SentinelOne management console, as well as with the individual Fortinet pieces that we've integrated with. And so for each triggered event, a corresponding call is made to the applicable Fortinet appliance, right? So it'll update it in real time and make any necessary adjustments based on the situation being detected. So let's take a couple of use cases. In a situation where you have a threat that's detected by SentinelOne, the hash of that file is ultimately sent to the FortiSandbox, where it's allowed to update its known bad list of files. So now there's no need for the sandbox to detonate the file and run an analysis, which could take anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes or so, because SentinelOne already knows that it's bad. The sandbox can also now immediately return a bad determination to the FortiGates and the FortiMail appliance when they query the sandbox about a file that they've encountered. So it kind of helps to expedite that process. Similarly, if you've retrieved a file through outside channels, or maybe it was something that SentinelOne didn't detect and you ultimately had to sandbox, or whatever the situation is, once the sandbox is able to make that bad determination, that hash can actually be sent to SentinelOne, and we will update our known bad file list. And from that point forward, we would actually block that file from being executed anywhere in the environment. So in this situation, it would actually eliminate the need for the machine learning algorithm or the cloud lookup or anything like that. Having the blacklist available to the agents is something that we would just straight out block, and there would be no execution anywhere. A third use case could be where SentinelOne has detected some threat, and if there's a file associated with the threat, we'll update the sandbox, as I mentioned before. But in this case, with the authenticator and the FortiGate, we would actually send the account information to the authenticator, which will lock out the account, and the IP information will be sent to the FortiGate so that we can implement a network block. So again, SentinelOne does have a host isolation feature as one of its response actions, but adding in the network quarantine and the account lockout, the account lockout as well, also kind of layers in the containment. And so all of these things combined kind of help improve response and minimize the potential for compromised credentials, lateral propagation, infection spreading, things like that. So it just kind of helps to contain the threat overall. I don't have a slide for it, but you could also consider a case where an endpoint is off the corporate network. So they're not under the protections of the corporate umbrella. And if they get infected and SentinelOne detects it, even though they're not on the corporate network, we will still update the on-premise devices so that when the user comes back home and they reconnect to the corporate network, we are already prepared and we're already protected. So the host will already be isolated, the account will already be locked out, and the sandbox will already be updated and all of the intelligence shared amongst the Fortinet Security Fabric appliances. So definitely a really good use case, something that should resonate with every customer that's out there, especially those with mobile workforces, which is pretty typical nowadays. Just kind of wanted to share a couple of use cases to help highlight potential value. Were there any questions, Paul?
Nope, I didn't have any more questions. I mean, if you guys do, you can type them in and we can read them out, or we can do a live Q&A at the end. So.
Cool deal. As I mentioned before, SentinelOne, we do play nice within an ecosystem. So we even play nice with the FortiClient. And so in this situation, basically what SentinelOne would do is we would heighten the security capabilities and the readiness by one, increasing the amount of visibility, but also introducing threat hunting and investigative capabilities on top of what the FortiClient can already deliver. So you would be able to leverage the signature-based approach of the FortiClient agent, but you'll also be able to leverage the behavioral and the active EDR capabilities of SentinelOne. For the most part, you're probably going to see a situation like this with organizations of a particular maturity or size, but definitely something that will work, and definitely something that's very capable as well. So in closing, so Fortinet, with SentinelOne and Fortinet, we've created a really great integration capability, something that's very well prepared and capable of quickly providing much more value than some of the all-encompassing platform solutions that are out there today. And if I leave you with any kind of takeaways today about SentinelOne, it's that we are a purpose-built solution to address endpoint protection as well as EDR with a single agent. That the agent is fully autonomous, no cloud reliance or cloud connectivity required for determination or conviction. Very unique and extremely valuable response actions. And overall, we're simplifying investigation and hunting with the active EDR capabilities.
Tommy, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
SentinelOne does not support signature-based attacks?
So we're not signature reliant. As I mentioned before, the preventative engine does have a cloud lookup. So if you're an endpoint that does have an internet connection and there's a file associated with the attack itself or the situation, the compromise, then we will hash that file. We will compare that against known intelligence. And if it comes back with a bad flag, then we will prevent it from executing. Now, if you're talking about behaviorally, or something that is fileless, then we don't support signatures. That's not the premise of SentinelOne. We use the behavior engine to look at the different behaviors and the different actions that are being taken by some attacker. And so again, behaviorally, if we can determine if you're doing something bad using the machine learning algorithm, then that's how we would detect the situation.
All right. And then the next question was, does this information flow back to and from the FortiGuard services? Basically, is the herd immunity through other customers who are also run integration with SentinelOne?
I'm not clear on what's being asked there.
So let's see here. This is from Derek. Derek, I'm going to unmute you real fast and then let you ask that question. I think. No, actually, so Derek, I can't unmute you, but could you elaborate on your question, Derek, for Tommy? Or Tommy, if you pull up the Q&A chat at the bottom, you could maybe read it and see if it makes more sense.
Does this information go back to and from the FortiGate services? Basically, is there? Oh, gotcha. So on the SentinelOne side, if you have multiple customers that have SentinelOne, we don't share amongst customers, so it's really just kind of within your environment. If one endpoint has some detection that's made off of it, we do share that, I guess, quote unquote, locally. So every other endpoint in your enterprise will also be protected against that threat. But if it's through different customers, we don't share, at least not on the SentinelOne side. I don't know if Fortinet does that. Maybe David or Paul, maybe you guys can answer that.
David, do you have know the answer to that?
Yeah, from my understanding, the FortiGuard is really more proprietary to Fortinet themselves, although there's a big, I should say, security group or community. They do share some high-level information among them. Fortinet has been in that community for a long time, ever since they established.
Gotcha. Appreciate that, David. I also see some questions in the chat. So how do you set it up? I know that it's compatible with FortiManager. Is it compatible with other Forti products or just FortiManager? So setup is actually pretty simple for us, especially if you're a cloud-based or a SaaS type of customer. So we stand up the management component within our cloud, which is AWS based. And basically all you do is install the agents that check in into the cloud environment. So it's actually a fairly simple deployment. Pricing and minimum agent counts, really no minimums, honestly. We do work with partners for like MSSPs for smaller customers, like under 100 endpoints. But we do have like a inside sales team that manages everything 1,000 and below, and then an enterprise sales team that manages everything 1,001 and above. Pricing varies. There's a tiered pricing approach. If you have an opportunity, we can definitely show you a couple of examples of pricing. But for us, we generally never lose on pricing, especially compared to some of our competitors. We're pretty aggressive on that. Like when you attack vector is discovered through someone else's environment, does that come back into the system as a whole? Yes. So Derek, to your elaboration, appreciate that. So yeah, so if you are, if something is detected, then if it's file based, then yes, that will populate amongst the environment within SentinelOne, like within your customer environment, and everybody will be protected by it. But if it's a behavioral kind of detection because it's the same behavior engine that everybody else runs, then you're seemingly protected across the board. Yes, whoever that is, if you want to contact me or Paul, if they can use you as a contact point.
Yes. Go ahead and email me about the 85 endpoint questions. So yeah, sorry for all the people that I forwarded my invite to on our call. You're all Paul Foot, so we will. We do have your names on a different list, but on this chat it says you're all me. So email me, and I will get you that information.
Awesome. Yeah, the other person that was asking in the Q&A window about the MSP pricing, if you can email Paul with that, and he'll forward you to me, and then we can get you some examples.
All right. So thanks, Tommy. I think that's looks like most of the questions for now. If you have any other questions, you can obviously email me. So you guys, one last thing we just want to put up there. We do have this survey that we were running. And for anyone that was at Accelerate, you guys saw this Lego that we're giving away. It's a 75,000 piece Lego set, a pretty big thing. But if you go to that survey, and again, our slide is advancing.
Yeah.
About that, guys. But we are doing a webinar again on the 26th. So in a couple days, going over the new operating system that Fortinet has put out. But on that webinar, we will be announcing the winner of this Lego. So just complete the survey. The address is there at the bottom, or if you email me, I can send it to you as well. You can go to the next slide, Tommy. So thanks for joining us. Again, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email me, and we can, answer those questions for you. And SentinelOne has this demo that Tommy did today, or even some more in-depth demos for customers that are looking forward to this. So thanks for joining us, and have a good afternoon. Thanks, Tommy.
Thanks, everybody.